Okay, so I'm Simon Mitchell, I'm the founder of Photo Enterprise, and I'm here with Sean Hawkey, who's a photographer and a journalist, and he's just done a very interesting talk on Peruvian silver mines. Firstly, your work is often about humanitarian crises and aid. Can you tell us about that?
Well, over the years, what I've focused on, what has been my key interest has been how people around the world are living, and in many cases people are living in situations of they're desperate for one reason or another. Lots of natural disasters and man-made disasters, wars and so on, where people require humanitarian aid, and in situations of simply underdevelopment where simple things, for example, clean water, will radically change their lives. And that's what I've been interested in largely over the years. And so, luckily, I've been able to dedicate a lot of my working life to that. And I'm still interested. I still do plenty.
Fantastic. That sounds really interesting. Now, going on to the Peruvian silver mine, can you tell us how it was mined and how you used to create some of that silver to create the portraits?
Well, the basis of photographic chemistry for 150 years has been silver. And so I've found a mine that would give me access in southern Peru. They mine it by it's pretty much the same as they mine anything nowadays. They drill with very long drill bits, and they put dynamite into the holes and blow it and come back, and all the rock that's been blown out, they select the rock which has got a certain amount of silver or gold in it. That's all ground up and it's leached out with cyanide, and so then the metal that is leached out with cyanide goes through to a smelter, and it's made into ingots and then purified. And the purification process, which is a daily thing in gold and silver mines, is they dissolve away the silver from the gold using nitric acid, and you end up with a solution of silver nitrate. And silver nitrate is what you can use for photography, and so I used the silver nitrate from the mine to produce the images.
Fantastic, yes. And you're saying cyanide, that must be a bit dangerous working with that.
Well, there's quite a few dangerous things, from the dynamite to the cyanide to, in other mines they use mercury, and they boil that off, and so the mercury's in the atmosphere. And the Caledonian process itself has got various dangerous chemicals that lots of the early photographers died early deaths. Yeah.
A dangerous job indeed. So what would you say is the photographic technique? How would you describe it as being so different from using an ordinary SLR camera?
First of all, there's no film involved, they're just plates. So I shoot either onto metal plates or onto glass. You can shoot onto virtually any surface you like, but tin types are done on metal, amber types are done on glass. The camera is a field view camera. It's made of wood and bellows, and the lens that I'm using is one of the early lenses from 1872. It's a Dalmea 3B, which is a British lens. It's got certain imperfections and aberrations to it, and so it gives a unique, it's a Petzval lens, it gives a unique visual aesthetic that you can't get, you can't reproduce. Although there are all sorts of filters to put on Instagram and so on, you cannot reproduce the visual effect that you get through using the old equipment. No.
How would you describe the effect?
First of all, you've got you can achieve a very narrow depth of field, and when you do that, you blow out the background and you get swirls, and it's a swirly bouquet is the typical description of the Petzval effect. Also, the Caledonian is only sensitive to colder light and to ultraviolet light, and so you're picking up things that we actually can't see with our eyes. So you can't reproduce that with Instagram or Photoshop. And because the ISO is so low, the Caledonian I'm using has got an ISO of 1. Your exposures are typically 12 seconds, 15 seconds, and so you're actually picking up a lot more of somebody's character, if you like. It's not a 500th of a second, 15 seconds. It's nearly like a little bit of video that's you've got in a still, and so it is a completely unique aesthetic that you can't get with digital images at all.
Fantastic. And I think you've used many cameras other than this one. Do you have a particular favourite?
The kit I've got at the moment is, I'm using a Deerdorf 8x10 and a Dalmaya 3B. But previously I was using Ukrainian equipment, FKD, and some of the lenses, the Industar lenses, do give really amazing images and incredibly cheap. You can pick up a whole kit for 100, 150 pounds.
Wow, that's very good.
Yeah. But for my day-to-day work as a journalist, I'm using digital equipment. I use Canon 5Ds. Yeah.
Yeah, good cameras. Okay, going back to the mine. How easy or difficult was it for you to transport all your gear? You mentioned you had like 5 cases worth of gear to take down.
Well, I had over 200 plates, and the plates were they weighed over 20 kilos. I had 200 watts of lighting and compact fluorescent lighting, huge old wooden tripod, and it was actually difficult to transport it all, and there's particular difficulties in transporting some of the chemicals that are involved that you're not allowed to transport. So that caused me some grief and delays, but all of these problems can be overcome eventually. Yeah.
Right, and you've got the proof in the photos. You told us, can you tell us a bit more detail as to how the silver was actually separated from the gold?
How the silver separated from the gold? It's done in a laboratory condition. It's a very dangerous thing to do. Do not do this at home. Use concentrated nitric acid, which dissolves silver, but it gives off some of the most toxic gases. So it has to be done in a very controlled environment where you do not come into contact at all with those gases. And you do wear breathing equipment anyway, but you have to make sure that you don't come into contact with it. One piece of advice that I've read online about doing it is that you should have printed out the description of the chemical reaction. Pin it onto the front of your shirt and onto the back of your shirt, so that if you collapse, paramedics can see whatever way you land. They can see what it is that has happened to you.
Good thinking.
It is deadly. You don't want to breathe it in at all. But it's a routine for the chemists working in mines, and I expected to actually have to do it myself. I didn't realise it was a daily routine for them, and there was people in a proper laboratory who helped me do it. So that was very handy. Yeah.
Wow, fantastic stuff. Now, you use Caledonian film. Can you explain the difference between that and traditional methods of film?
Caledonian is a liquid which, to produce the film on the surface of the plate, you actually have to pour it onto the plate. And they use a technique called waiter's technique. So you hold your plate on the tips of your fingers, you pour it until until the film covers it completely, and you drip off the excess. You allow it to gel, and then you sensitize it in a silver nitrate bath. And then in dark conditions, you put that into your film holder, your plate holder, transport it to your camera, make the exposure, and back to the dark room to develop your plate. Yeah.
Okay, fascinating stuff. And you mentioned in your talk there were some security issues being a gold mine. Was there much theft going on?
Well, small-scale mines are very vulnerable to theft, and they're preyed upon by organised criminals. So they have to be very well organised with their security. You know, anybody on site is a security issue, and so I was thoroughly vetted and controlled while I was in the mine. Yeah, they had several months before they'd had a robbery of $750,000 of gold. So, yeah.
Dodgy stuff. And were you were developing, I assume, the plates straight away after you'd taken the photos?
Yeah. Plates. It's called the wet plate technique because it has to remain wet. So if it dries out, the sensitivity of the plates is destroyed, and that you don't have an exposure. So I had to do it very quick. In Britain, you get 10 seconds for it. 10 minutes before it dries out. In Peru, up in the highlands at about 3,000 meters in the desert, in the Atacama Desert, I was getting 90 seconds before. So the entire process from pouring it to developing it. So I had to get that exposure done very, very quickly and get straight into the darkroom to develop it. Yeah, I lost a lot of plates because it was too dry. Yeah.
But the ones you did get came out very well, having seen some of them.
Yeah, some of them, I was very happy with some of them, and the miners loved the whole process, so we had a lot of fun. Lots of the plates I left behind with the miners, and I took a selection with me which have been used by New York Times and BBC and The Independent, yeah, so I'm very pleased.
Fantastic. Well, that's really good. Well, thank you very much for this interview today and speaking to us. If somebody wanted to find out more about you or see some more of your photos, what's your website where they could look you up?
www.hawkey.co.uk.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much.